So
we are joined now by the Work and Pension Secretary, Mel Stride, who's barely off our screens. You seem to be on the morning round an awful lot, considered a safe pair of hands, I presume. Good to see you again, Mr. Stride. And first of all, your reaction to this 2% figure for inflation. Not going to try and claim credit for that, are you?
Well, to a degree, yes, I am, but I'll come on to that. I think the implications are really good news because it was up over 11% back in the autumn. The Prime Minister made it prime objective to get that down. That has now been delivered because 2%, of course, is bang on the Bank of England target, and this is its lowest level in almost 3 years. In terms of who gets the credit, the Bank of England, of course, through monetary policy and interest rates, is there to control inflation, but government has to do its bit on the fiscal side. So we have to work with the Bank of England. So, for example, all those excess wage demands at higher than the rate of inflation that we've had to negotiate and keep a lid on those kind of cost pressures is something that the government has actively done to make sure that we can help alongside the Bank of England to bring those inflationary numbers down.
A few raised eyebrows from the comments from Jeremy Hunt suggesting that the government has done a great job. I mean, Liz Truss, really?
Well, Liz Truss was a very small amount of time as Prime Minister, of course. And
Partygate, PPE. I mean, I can list them.
Yeah, but look, the bigger picture here that I think matters is if you go back to the time of COVID, for example, is that Rishi Sunak, as then Chancellor, supported the economy through furlough. The economy had contracted 10% overnight, if you recall, and we were worried about mass unemployment. That didn't happen because of the prompt action that Rishi Sunak took. We also had billions of pounds in cost of living support payments and energy price support for people through the inflation that we've experienced more recently because of the Ukraine war. And we've now reached a point where the economy in the last quarter has grown at the joint fastest rate in the G7. We've got inflation down to target. We've got real wages for 11 consecutive months increasing, and we are bearing down on people's taxes. Unlike Labour, who are going to put taxes up.
It's interesting, though, that you mentioned furlough. Billionaire John Caldwell has, having previously donated $500,000 to the Conservatives, is backing Starmer and the Labour Party. And he says on a personal level, Sunak is an absolute dud. And he specifically labels furlough. He says we overpaid on that. It was too wide-ranging. And, of course, he also cites his disastrous decision and lack of judgment on D-Day.
So I think if you look at Rishi's record overall, it's very strong. I've gone through some of that. So he was the Chancellor that got us through COVID with furlough, avoided mass unemployment, supported millions of families that way. He was instrumental in the cost of living support we provided through a very difficult time when inflation was very high. He has now driven inflation down back to target. We have a very rapidly growing economy. We have real wages increasing. We've got a near record level of employment in this country. Almost, we've got very historically low level of unemployment. Those things don't happen by accident. They're because people lead governments that take the tough decisions, the clear, bold actions to make those things happen. And the future, if we have an opportunity to form a government, is going to be lower taxes, building on the success that Rishi Sunak has achieved within the economy.
But, I mean, the picture you paint just has no bearing in reality. You know, if it was as rosy as you're trying to suggest, why on earth are we seeing disastrous poll after disastrous poll? The latest from Ipsos puts the Conservatives at 115, reduced to just a mere rump. And the personal approval ratings for Rishi Sunak are embarrassing.
So there is a definite challenger. The answer to your question is what we've got to get better and better at and push harder and harder on is opening people's eyes as to what a majority Labour government is going to mean. It's going to mean higher taxes. We've seen this latest paper, the Tribune paper, which was put forward by MPs, and Keir Starmer himself is a member of that group, showing billions of pounds worth of suggested tax increases, inheritance tax increases. I represent a rural constituency, and my farmers are very worried about passing their farm on average, getting lumber with a £600,000 bill, tax bill strung around their neck. There is a tax tornado coming our way from the Labour Party. They've got to be honest with the country and tell us exactly what that's going to mean to people. I mean, Keir Starmer now suggesting that people that have got savings who are working people are not working people and are therefore not exempt from the tax rises he's going to be bringing in. is absolutely appalling.
Well,
I mean,
yes, but there will be tax rises.
20 million working people with
Let's
savings.
be honest, you've baked in tax rises in the Conservative manifesto and indeed the spring budget, which will see tax rises even if you did, which is unlikely to happen, win the next election because you're refusing to change the tax thresholds.
Well, so we spent £400 billion providing the support that I've gone through just now around COVID and inflationary support. And that has to be paid down. And that, as with other countries, has meant an increase in the tax burden. But if you look at the baked-in numbers, the OBR numbers, actually, what Labour are saying, what they're telling us about, is they'll take us to the highest tax burden in our history, highest since 1948, when records first began. But it's what they're not telling us about that is worrying. It is those inheritance tax increases. It is capital gains tax, where they've been talking about possibly aligning that with income tax rates. That will be a huge increase in taxation for people. They've got to be straight with us. They've got to tell us, where are these taxes going to fall?
Yes, but I suppose my question is, why is your message not cutting through? And, you know, George Osborne yesterday was saying that Rishi Sunak's actually just fighting completely the wrong fight by going after reform voters. Nigel Farage is predicting that next week reform will overtake Conservatives in the polls. So, you know, which direction do you think that Sunak should be taking? Because it's not working at the moment, is it?
I think it's really important, as I say, that we keep pressing the fact that this is a binary choice. It's going to be Keir Starmer with very high taxes, where he's not telling us where that tax burden is going to fall, other than he's just included about 20 million people with savings who are working people. They should now start saving a bit harder, because they're going to get clobbered with additional taxes due to Labour. We've got to keep putting those points across, and Labour have got to come out with some answers. It's just not good enough to sit on a large poll lead and expect to keep quiet, keep a low profile, not say anything, not tell anybody what your real plans are, and just drift over the line. That's not good enough. And that's where we've got to continue to hold Labour to account and drive, and it's the media's job as well, to get those answers out.
But his heart's not in it, is it? Rishi Sunak has almost given up. I mean, what on earth is he doing yesterday, swanning around in Clovelly, hanging out with Sir Geoffrey Cox in one of the safest seats in the country? He should be out fighting in the marginals.
What he was talking about there, amongst other things, is exactly what my farming and rural community here are really, really worried about, which is the potential removal of a tax relief called agricultural property relief. And that means if a farmer passes on his farm at the moment, there isn't you have made that point, yeah. But it's an important point for our rural communities, because if he does get rid of that relief, then what it'll mean is farms being split up, because that money will have to be found. It'll be detrimental to the production of food in our country. We are a party that's brought in very clear targets around food security, because we think it matters that we produce our own food. I tell you, the Labour Party are not going to stand up for rural communities. They've had very little to do with rural communities for an awfully long time, because they haven't had much representation in rural communities. And I'm afraid, they had a manifesto that had 87 words addressing farming. And they are not going to increase the amount of money going to farming. We will put an extra £1 billion in to farming, so we uprate the support for farmers by inflation. The Labour Party have not said they will do that. Farming and agriculture is going to get a really raw deal. So that's why Rishi was down in the West Country, talking to farmers, because we care about that. OK, plenty of rural constituencies which are marginal as well. But Mel Stride, take your point. Secretary of State for Work and Pensions, thanks for joining us. I'm sure we'll see you again before the election comes around. Look forward to it. Thank you.